Okay, so I decided to start the Grimrose Girls audiobook. I'm just running a few errands today, but I decided to start this one just because I just need to bite the bullet and start it, and I feel like I'm being very pessimistic about it because I could end up liking this a lot more. The problem was I started this book and I barely got into it. All I know is that they're at school. There's 5 friends. They're all rip-offs of fairy tales. There's Ella, and she has stepsisters that are super mean to her. Um, like Cinderella. And they're at school, and one of their friends was found dead, and everybody's saying it's a suicide, but her friends don't think that. And eventually they will try to figure out what actually happened, and that's gonna be the plot of this book. But I haven't gotten to that yet. I've only gotten backstory and this new girl showing up and taking the spot of their friend that passed away. So I think it'll get better. I'm just not interested in it at all yet, which is too bad because I was 50 or so pages into it, which isn't a lot, but it's kind of decent. But I didn't really care about any of the characters from what I remember. This is several months ago I tried to read this book, but I'll keep you updated if there's anything. But I wanted to let you know which one I was starting with. It's this one. We'll see. The audiobook says it's going to be super short. It says that I have a little less than 6 hours of this audiobook, so I'll be done in a few days, but hopefully it gets better. I know there is a second book. This is a duology. There's 2. Thank goodness I didn't buy the second one because I really thought about it, because I don't really like buying just one book in a series. I typically buy at the whole series, but I didn't with this one, which is good because I'm not feeling it so far, but hopefully that changes. I am officially one book down. I finished this audiobook last night. What I want to say about this book, The Grimrose Girls, is it's a really interesting plot line. I think if you liked the show Once Upon a Time, you would enjoy this book, or at least also think the plot is cool. What fell short for me was the execution of this. So I'm trying to think about, let me read the back. Okay, no, I was trying to make sure what was and was not a spoiler for this. So basically they attend this really elite, rich, top of the top boarding school that they're all at, called Grimrose Academy. And it starts off with one of their friends is gone. She's died, and it's been ruled a suicide, but her 3 friends don't believe it, and then this new girl moves into her room and kind of takes her spot at the academy. And they find out what their friend was doing leading up to her death. And she became really fascinated with the school's history and how it linked to this storybook, and basically how the girls at this school, well, so far it's really focusing on the girls, but I don't want to say it's limited to them. I don't know, but how these fairy tales correspond with girls at this school, and how it foretells their ending. But it's the Grimm brothers version of it. It is not a happy-go-lucky Disney version, unfortunately. So I think the concept was interesting of the storybook and the fairy tales, the Grimm brothers ones, and how it corresponds with the students, and how to escape fate, or whatever you want to call it. So I think that's an interesting premise. But this book is broken up in 4 different POVs, and each POV, they each have at least one or more friends that they interact with. So I was getting so lost with characters To be fair, like, I don't know if everybody would have that experience, but I was audiobooking it, so I was listening to it while I was driving, and I wasn't paying like the most attention to it. But I found myself getting lost there, and I really think it was like the execution of this that fell short for me. But it was an enjoyable time for the most part. Some points I did get kind of bored though. But again, interesting plot, interesting premise. I kind of want to audiobook the second one at some point, just because I just want to know. I want to know. I want it to make sense. I want to see how things are connected and like what it means. Because this one doesn't end per se on like a cliffhanger, but like things aren't really resolved. I'll say that. So that's it for the Grimrose Girls. I am happy I didn't buy both of these at the same time. I probably will be donating or like getting rid of this book. I just don't think it needs a spot on my shelf. Things are pretty full and tight at the moment, so she'll be going to a better home. But it felt so good to take it off like my Goodreads like currently reading page. So I'm glad we can close the chapter on book one. So I've been reading this for the past couple of days and I'm finally getting more into it, which is good. When I put this down before, I was on page 42, 49, like not very far. I'm now on page 163 and we're finally like getting into it. And I'm enjoying it. I do want to sit down and just read a good chunk of it. But I have to talk about, because I can't remember if I did, but this book takes place at Yale, the secret like societies at Yale, and Yale is in New Haven, and I live in Connecticut. I'm in New Haven and North Haven quite often, and it's just so funny. It's so funny because in this world, like they just kind of talk poorly about New Haven, and it's just like really funny to me. Like I literally paused this because there's one line and it says, maybe if he had been from somewhere like Phoenix instead of cursed New Haven. I just think that's so funny. I think anybody would think this is funny. To be fair, this version of New Haven is also just really dangerous because of like the magic that there is here. But to give a real update, we're getting a lot of background on the main character, Alex. I refuse to call her Galaxy. I refuse. Alex. We're getting backstory on her and what it's been like for her growing up, because she's like apparently like one of the only people out there. Apparently this is like something they've never heard of, but she can see grays 24/7. Normally people need to take some like concoction of whatever to see the grays, and grays are like ghosts. They're like people in what I would describe as like a limbo, like between being a living person and like being in the afterlife. They call it like crossing the veil, but I just think of it as like they're like stuck in limbo. And she's been recruited to the ninth house, which is Leith or something like that, which is like the ninth secret like society house at Yale. And the purpose of this society house is to regulate the other society houses that do magic and make sure they're like doing it safely, they are regulated, like yada yada yada. Their job is to oversee and keep it safe and make sure none of it gets out, I guess. So that's why they recruited her, because she Oh, and it's also to keep these societies safe, because when they are doing their like rituals and whatnot, there are greys there, because greys are attracted to the stuff that goes on at these, what was the word I just used? The greys are attracted to what the society houses are doing, their rituals or whatever. And I've been getting like random bits of information about what happened to one of the characters. I'm so interested in that dynamic. I want to know what is going on, because these little crumbs I'm getting, it's making me want more. It's doing what it's supposed to, but also I keep on remembering like all these little thoughts I've had when reading this. So sorry, but it is so jarring to think that like this author who wrote this book, Ninth House, also wrote Shadow and Bone. Now, I've read more than just Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I read the entire Shadow and Bone trilogy, which just was not for me. I just think for me it read too YA for what I'm looking for, and I just thought for me it was a kind of like surface level book series. Did love Nikolai though. And I did like the Six of Crows duology, and I think there's already like a jarring difference in terms of like the writing, the character development, like just how deep the stories are compared to one another. And then you add like this, it's so jarring. I feel like it would be so jarring to go from Shadow and Bone and then this book. Same author. So she has range, you know, she really does. So that's quite interesting as well. I'm enjoying this. It's time to talk, because last night I finished up 2 of the books. I finished up 2. It felt so good to get these off of my currently reading tab on Goodreads. So where to begin? I'll begin with Book of Night. So I don't know if I've actually even shown this, but I do own a physical copy of this book. And it's signed, so I will be keeping it. This book. I almost finished it up on my drive home yesterday, but I didn't. I had like 15 minutes left, so I just listened to it while I was tidying up around my room. And the ending of this book did pick up a lot. I think the problem was that I didn't love the direction that it went in. It's so sad, but there wasn't much that I really enjoyed about this book, and it was hard because I was listening to it at the same time I was reading Ninth House, and the characters in these 2 books are kind of similar, but I like the way this character in Ninth House is written a lot more. It's just like a lot deeper. And I was looking at some of the reviews for this book on Goodreads after I finished it, and it was funny because other people made the same connection as well. It's just funny to me because I was actually reading them at the same time. Where like this character is like kind of a darker, more rough around the edges character, I guess you could say. But her actions are just like, oh, it's because she's just like that, you know what I mean? This book was just missing, in my opinion. This is supposed to be Holly Black's like adult debut, but I just think her YA books are better written, maybe better developed. And it's sad because I feel like the story can have potential, because I thought the magic system is like unique. It's cool, like the shadows and everything. I just think it needed a lot more structure, because don't really understand like the purpose of having like a special shadow and being like a glow mist, like other than like using your shadow to like harm people or do bad things. Like to me it wasn't like clear like what was just like so great about it other than being able to say, hey, I have like a magic shadow. I don't know. I feel like that could have used a lot more. This is just like a very like surface level book, unfortunately. The ending though, like that 10 minutes I was listening to while tidying up my room, that made me upset. It made me so upset because like things were kind of happening and I was like, what's gonna happen? There's 10 minutes left of this book. This is like a standalone book. Well, no, apparently it's not, because this is gonna be a duology. There's going to be a second book coming out. I don't think I'll like it, but I want to know what happens, so I'm really at a crossroads with that. But man, the last little chapter of this book was kind of crazy. I really don't know what is going to be happening going forward. I really don't. And I just don't know what else to say. This book just like missed so many marks for me. There are like a lot of characters, but I feel like we don't really like know a lot about them. We don't really care about them. The one character like I did kind of care about was I can't even get into some of this stuff. I don't know what to say. I don't know how I would have gotten through this book if I was not audiobooking it. I don't know how I would have sat here and read this whole book. I probably would have, but it would have been really hard, in all honesty. So I gave this a 2.5. It's probably realistically just a 2. Unfortunate, but I got it done. It's still funny though, because I really enjoyed the Cruel Prince trilogy, her spin-off trilogy. Like I really liked them. I really liked the characters she made, and I just did not feel the same way about anything in this book. Anything. I just don't care, which is sad. But enough about that. It feels so bad like being kind of negative, and I don't want to be like too harsh, but yeah, God only knows what I'll do when the second one comes out. There's a chance I would audiobook it, but that would be it. Next. Ninth House. You most definitely cannot tell, but I have like these like light gray tabs in here. I really liked this book. I'm upset about parts of this book for sure. For sure. The only reason I'm mad at this book is because I wanted a different outcome for one of the characters in this book. Unfortunately, I didn't get it. And that's good and fine and all, but I think I was gonna say I think the magic in this world is really interesting, but it's not even per se like the magic in this world, but the abilities of our main character in this book. She can see like the grays, like the ghosts. I kind of described it as purgatory because that's kind of how I see it, but I guess it's not really purgatory, it's like a veil. So the grays that she sees are like have passed, and they're not like stuck in the real world. They just kind of like go and visit. They kind of like pass back and forth. So I don't think purgatory isn't the right term for it, but she's a very interesting main character. And let me tell you, once I got to the last like 70 pages of this book, no, a little bit less than that. No, actually, yeah, about like the last 60 pages of this book, my jaw was dropped, especially at the very end. Whoa. I really enjoyed this. I gave it a 4.25 because the beginning was a little hard for me to get into, and I wish we had more of certain characters, but I really liked following around our main character. She's very scrappy, and she's just like a very interesting main character to be in the point of view of, like based on like how she sees things and like wants to go about things, like her moral compass. Like it's not like really good or really bad. It's like a very interesting place to be and like see why she does things and why she does things the way she does, I guess. I really appreciated Alex. I liked her a lot. What else? What else to say? I guess I didn't realize, I don't think I really knew anything about this book before getting into it. The thing that finally sold me on this book is that it was compared to the Sholomance series, aka A Deadly Education, and I loved that series. And I don't think they're like similar really at all. Maybe you get like a similar vibe. I do think if you liked A Deadly Education, you would probably like this, but you're not going to be getting like a similar thing. It's just a similar vibe. But I didn't really know. I thought this was just going to be like dark academia with some fantasy. But really there's like a mystery that they're all on, and I'm a sucker for a good mystery. And I thought it was super interesting. I was definitely getting all of the houses confused because there's 9, and her house, Leith, is the 9th house. There is a little section at the end, I realized only after I finished the book, that they have like a thing for all of the houses. And it has like the name, the year they were established, and like the use. I just realized they have like notable alumni. She's just putting like presidents and businessmen on here. Anderson Cooper, he was mentioned in the book. That's so funny. Okay, sorry. So it has the houses, like the year they were established and kind of like what that house focuses on. So like scroll and key. 1842, teachings, portal magic. Astral and etherical projection. So that definitely probably would have been beneficial to me to like flip back to while reading it, but I just didn't even know it was here. But I do think it's interesting, like all the magic each house has and like what their specialty is, and it's really cool to get to see like what these houses can accomplish, like the things that they have access to is really interesting. I'm also biased because I think it's so cool the way they talk about New Haven as like a city, because I'm around New Haven. I'm out here in Connecticut, so it was like interesting to compare like the real like kind of history of New Haven and how the city prospers, because New Haven is a very interesting city. It is like very uppity in the sense that like Yale is there, but it's not necessarily like a prospering city. And in this book they kind of dive into like why that might have been, if it has anything to do with the magic here, like why wasn't New Haven like the next Manhattan or the next Cambridge, which is where Harvard is. So I thought that was super interesting and also at times really funny. I found myself underlining a lot of the stuff about New Haven. I'm very excited to continue with the next book. It won't be the next one I read, but I do have it ordered. It's coming in a few days, so I will be diving into that one hopefully soon. But yeah, I feel like I only have good things to say about this book. I'm a little surprised, but I'm also not. If I knew this had mystery, I probably would have gotten into it a lot sooner. But 2 big ones knocked off. Oh, I didn't do this before, but I started reading this book in October of 2023, and I'm finally done with it. This book I started last month, but I had to put it on pause for another thing I was working on, so I finally got to finish it now. Next, I will be diving into All of Our Demise, which is the second book in the All of Us Villains duology by Amanda Foody and who else? Oh, C.L. Herman. So I already read the first book and about half of this one. I think Goodreads says I'm like 40-something% through. God, I stopped this mid-chapter. What is wrong with me? I was thinking about it though, and I think I really remember everything I'm gonna need to remember about this series, surprisingly. And I really enjoyed this book series, and like the reason I put it down was because I was like reading this and another book at the same time, and when I finished that other book I just moved on to something else and kind of forgot about this one. This this poor guy just kind of got forgotten. I'm excited to finally be picking it back up again and finishing it. I think I'm gonna like it. I was liking it. This book is kind of interesting. So they live in this town, and in this town, like, there is magic, but there are like 6 or 7 families that have like controlled this like secret source of magic that like nobody else knows about. So like every 10 years or so, maybe it's longer, maybe it's 20 years, I don't know, but like every 10 years they have this competition where one kid, one like 16-year-old kid from each family goes in and has like a Hunger Games, pretty much. They have their own Hunger Games. One kid from each family goes in and they kind of battle to the end of their lives. And whoever the last one standing is, their family gets to control that power for the next 10 years until there is the next event. I forgot what they call it. I don't see it listed on the back. I forget what it's called, but they have like this tournament in this arena. And the way that magic is done in this series is they have like these rings. You can kind of see them on the covers of the book. They have like these rings and they store like special like spells and stuff in them. So like that's how they like call on the power. It's not like something that they just each like possess or something. So people can have like stronger spells going into it, stronger defenses, and the magic that's like written in here is, I thought, was super cool. I already liked Amanda Foodie's work. I audiobooked a trilogy of hers, which was called The Ace of I'm getting it confused now because there's 2 book titles and they're very similar. Okay, yes. It's called the Ace of Shades trilogy, and I really liked it. Or it's called the Shadow Game. Oh my god, it's on Kindle Unlimited. I didn't know that. It wasn't on Kindle Unlimited when I was going through them. I audiobooked them. Oh, 2 of them are. The last one isn't? Doesn't seem so. But I really loved that trilogy. And this duology, she's also writing with C.L. Herman. But they're really good. I do have trust issues with Amanda though, so I'm very nervous to see how this ends. But yeah, I feel like that's a pretty good synopsis of what this is and why I'm excited to read it. So this is the last one I have on the list for this video, and I wasn't really thinking about it, but when I had them all stacked together, I was like, wow, like all of these books are like kind of darker fantasies. I mean, I guess the Grimrose Girls wasn't really like dark, but like these kind of all are. So I didn't have like any other books that I felt like were super different to do in this, but it is what it is. I think we'll end on a high note with this, which is needed. Okay, there's a bit to go through because I'm finally done. I've knocked a few out of the park. So we started with Grimrose Girls, which was good to finish, but not a great read for me. And then sadly we went over 2 with Book of Night for several reasons. I'm once again glad I finished it. It was a little different than other books I read because it is a darker tale with darker characters, or more like morally gray characters, but just didn't hit the mark for me, sadly. Then Then we had a gem, Ninth House. This was the book I was most excited to read. I would not have normally put this book like on a temporarily like DNF or like a pause. So it is like a little bit of a cheat, but it is a book I had started and not finished. So I'm not surprised that this is like the biggest hit out of them. Now, the books I haven't talked about yet. I did finish All of Our Demise. It was harder to get back into than I thought it would be because I kind of stopped at a point where I didn't love the direction it was going in. I more so liked the direction of the first book, and things were starting to change at the point where I stopped previously. But in the end, I like the magic in this book was just really cool. Like the spells and the stuff that they could do, some stuff with like illusions. I just thought that was really well done. My jaw was kind of dropped at the end because Amanda Foodie does as Amanda Foodie does. Actually, could have been C.L. Herman that did the thing I'm thinking of, but the characters in this are so interesting. I definitely have a favorite. Alistair is my favorite. Sumi. There are some kind of I was sad at bits of this book, but I do overall recommend this duology. I think I might have liked the Shadow Games Ace of Shades series a little bit better, but this was still good. This was still a good read. It was like a 3.5 type of book. I'm not mad at it. I did get sucked in towards the end again finally, but I did end up audiobooking from where I paused like a good chunk back in, and then I did read the rest of it, but checked this one off our list. And then, in a surprise turn of events, I finally finished Anxious People because, God, it's funny. This book took me like a whole year to read, like a few days longer than a year. I started this in May of 2023. But I remember this book is kind of kooky. This is a kind of kooky book. It is like very silly and funny and like satirical at times, but the point in which I stopped reading was because there was a lot of really heavy material back to back to back to back to back. There are some like trigger warnings in this book, the biggest one I think being suicide or discussion of suicide, suicidal thoughts, and there was just a lot of that for like one chunk of the book, which was just like a little disheartening to like only be reading that. So I did put it down for a bit, and when I did eventually pick this back up, it wasn't a big topic throughout the remainder of the book. It was still kind of prevalent, but it wasn't harped on quite the way it was when I was putting it down. So overall, I'm really glad I finished this book. I kind of want to read more of his books, Frederick Bachman. I think he's funny. This is a funny, silly book for the most part. I would highly recommend this book because I haven't talked about it yet. It starts off with this person who is trying to rob a bank, and the bank that they are trying to rob is actually a cashless bank, so they can't even rob the bank. So in a frantic fleeing from the cashless bank, they end up stumbling upon an open house in like the apartment across from the bank, and it's like New Year's Eve, and there's like 7 people at this open house, and the bank robber holds them like hostage. But it's kooky. God, this book is kooky. I don't know like how else to say it, but the robber, you learn a lot about their backstory, like why they were doing this. Each person who is at the open house, like their backstory, why they're at this open house. And I wouldn't say it's low stakes, but God, it is kind of silly, but in a good, great way. This book is kind of just like more like a character driven rather than like storyline driven. And you see like the way people interact with each other, how they relate to one another, people who have like very different backgrounds and upbringings and ages, and it was great in the end. There are also 2 detectives in this book, so it kind of like jumps timelines a little bit. So it'll be like them in the apartment held hostage, and then them interviewing with the police on like what just happened and what we heard previously in the other chapter, like relaying it to the cops. So this was a 4-star. It would have been higher, but it really did take me out for a little bit. But I'd be interested to read more of his books. I don't think it'll happen anytime soon, because I do believe all of his books are like sad and emotional. So I don't know if I'm there yet, but he's on my radar, and I'm very glad that I got back to this. It was such a surprise for me to pick back up. I honestly forgot I had this book and had read like 40% of this book for a long time. So I'm glad I got these done. I got 5 books off of my currently reading tab. Some books I started a year ago, some books I started last month. So, and it's good because now these books aren't just sitting in my shelf. Like I said, I'm going to be donating this book for sure. I probably would donate Book of Night, but it is a signed copy, and I do like Holly Black's other books, so I will be keeping it. Stay tuned to find out if I ever end up going through with book 2 in this series, but there were some hits and misses in this for sure. But again, glad it's done. I will have to do this again because I had like 20 books that I have like briefly started and have not finished, so maybe this will become a regular thing. But that's all this time.